Hey, Chief, congratulations on the retirement.
Thank you very much.
That's very exciting. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
To get out. You took the job in early 2018.
Right.
And within a couple of years, I called them icebergs. Things approached you in your job that you had really no control over, and yet you had to deal with as the chief of a police force. I'm just going to throw a couple things at you. And what I'd like to just have you do is, first of all, tell me what was the challenge that this presented to SPS, and how you responded.
Sure.
And the first one I wanted to bring up was Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
It wasn't too far into your tenure when all of a sudden, like, there were marches on defunding the police, all sorts of questions.
Yeah. So I think the big challenge for us there, I mean, we had staff members who, early on there was a march that came to the police station. And there's about 3,000 people, and they started downtown, and they came here. And so we had staff that wanted to go out and march with them. It was a march against racism. And so we had staff with black officers and just the civilian staff and other officers that wanted to participate, and we thought this was awesome, right? And then we realized they were marching to the police station because we were sort of seen as an institution that supported racism or that had racial bias, and it was quite an awakening, to be honest. And it was something that was happening not just here, but I think across Canada for sure, across the globe at one point after the murder of George Floyd. And so what it required us to do is to reassess our connection with that community, our engagement with the black community, to make sure that we knew who the black community leaders were, that we were in touch with them, that we understood the needs of their communities and the distinctness of their individual communities. And so we did a lot of things, in response. Of course, we had designated seats on our advisory committees for black communities now. We have a lot stronger relationship, certainly, than we once did. And I think we have got strong partnership with different black communities. But it put us on our heels a little bit because, we had, I think, assumed strong relationships. And that was dangerous because we needed to continue to build those. It's a work that's got to be continuous. But it was not a great time for sure.
I'm thinking they're marching to the station, and are you guys going, wait a minute, are we the baddies here?
That's exactly what it felt like, to be honest. I think we all, we had for years worked hard on our, connection to community and sort of trying to be strong supporters and allies for different groups. And then to be seen as somebody who was opposed to that or somebody who was contributing to racial bias. It was a challenge for us, for sure. And of course we have this diverse police service too. So we have black officers, we have, diverse officers, and we had to wonder, what are they thinking? What are they wondering about, or what's their challenges and needs too? So we had to make sure we address that.
How did you find the tightrope? Because certainly, in media, you immediately ran into, well, it's not just Black Lives Matter, all lives matter.
Right.
And there's a wonderfully diverse ethnic community in this city.
Yeah.
And were you concerned or aware that we can't be seen to be sort of overcompensating just because there was black people in a march?
Yeah.
There's a lot of communities out there that might feel the same way.
Yeah, and that's kind of the approach we took. So and it wasn't just policing. Some of our partners developed opportunities for us to connect to the broader community as well. So there's, the People's Bridge Advocacy in Saskatoon is a good example of that. So there's, the person who's chairing that is from the black community, but there are people from the Korean community and from, the different Asian communities. And so it's an opportunity for us to meet together to talk about what is a common experience from all these diverse groups, including groups like, say, the Students Association at the University of Saskatchewan. They have their own community. They're from all over the world, but just being a student and being diverse and being a young, they have their own needs. And so we've had different ways of connecting and making sure that we're engaging well, I think, with the different diverse groups. Because Saskatoon, 1 in 5 people wasn't born in Canada that lives here in Saskatoon. So it's not a small group that, and it's not a homogenous group for sure. There's so many different distinct groups that we need to be aware of and need to know what their needs are.
Were you disappointed in the community that they would have had that view of you? It's like, don't you guys know what we do?
Yeah. I don't, you know, I don't know if I should be disappointed. I think we were. I was surprised and concerned, but you know, I understood that it's not about us. It's not about Saskatoon even. It was about the experience that racialized people have had with institutions like ours. And what we saw in the news every night then was the United States, and we saw the police experience there. And people don't know the difference between the US and the policing models that they have there in Canada and the policing models we have here. And so it's easy to assume that what happens there is exactly what would happen here. And so I understand it. But it's still hard to realize that you have to address it too. You know, like it was something that was, it was probably from an organizational perspective, it was good that we corrected some of the things we were doing or added things that we weren't doing, including some of the ways we engage with the diverse communities.
What would you have corrected?
Well, I think, you know, we used to have this diversity committee, and it was just sort of this ad hoc group of diverse communities, but we didn't specifically have seats for specific groups that often would have histories of conflict with policing, like the Black community, because we see that maybe as not a Canadian issue or not a Saskatchewan issue, but it most certainly is. And there's also people from other countries and other provinces that have had that experience that move and live here. So I think we needed to be more sensitive, and then also to recognize that we won't know which community next needs our support. So, I mean, the Ukrainian community, for example, we always connected with them, but now more than ever, they need support, certainly from the police. And throughout COVID, we had the Chinese community here that needed to be supported and connected to policing. And we've had the queer community for a number of different occasions when they've had crisis in their communities and they need to be engaged with. So there's, you know, next week it could be something else and somewhere else, and we need to be able to know who's in our community, what kind of supports are needed, and how the police play a role in that.
Was it hard for you personally, and I've never seen you do this, play the card of your own background? To play to people and say, like, look, I'm Métis, I understand this.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, I think it would be ridiculous, to be honest, for me to do that, just simply because of I don't reflect the experiences of a lot of Indigenous people, and so I don't do that. But I do have family members, and I've watched people experience things like that, and so you have that context. But we also connect very closely with the First Nation communities, and that's not a homogenous group, of course, and even the Métis communities, which are also not homogenous in Saskatchewan. So we have multiple ways of making sure we have voices with them, that we have partnership with them, and that we, I think as an organization, realize that we have a real unique history with the First Nation and Métis communities. It's not just about being diverse communities and needing support, it's about this lengthy history of conflict. So we have a special relationship, I think, with them.
Special conflict.
Yes, yeah.
It is what it is, though.
Yeah.
The second area, of course, is the pandemic.
Yes, well, pandemic had a lot of challenges just initially around human resources. So we had a lot of staff at the time that were away on annual leave. They were in hot countries. They were returning to and needed to quarantine when they got back for 14 days. And we had to make policies on the fly about who was going to be allowed at work and what we were going to do for protective equipment and how were we going to make sure if we did get a lot of people infected with COVID that we still would have enough folks to respond to those, the calls that were urgent. And so that was a challenge. And we developed some really good practices early on about meeting every day and sort of, looking at this from a tactical perspective and making sure that we were nimble and flexible and could change policies as we went. Our unions, thankfully, were on board with us and worked well with us. Getting equipment was tough. Getting protective equipment was a challenge at times. Getting, our officers to get the protective shots that first came out was impossible, and so we had real challenges about just feeling that we were meeting our obligations to keep our staff safe. You know, we had people who were isolating 3-4 times, so even if they were not infected, they were emotionally impacted by having to isolate 4 times away from their families, and, you know, that kind of stuff. So that was the biggest challenge I think that I've faced, and I say hats off to anybody that led any kind of an organization through COVID, whether that's a public organization like mine or a private one, and trying to stay in business and trying to protect your staff and just exist through it. It was tough. I think what we learned there was that you know, we have to be prepared for the unknown, whether it's a weather event. We've seen that while I've been here too, or some kind of medical event like that. And we're good at it, actually. Police, you know, we're good at sort of figuring out a response to a threat and being very tactical. So I think once we had access to, you know, to the COVID-19 shots and could feel a little bit better about, you know, our staff being protected, that, you know, we started to relax a little bit, but it was a challenge for sure.
You also had to wrestle with, many organizations, having a staff that weren't necessarily all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me, and I don't know if I just was naive, but I didn't expect to see that, and we saw it, and I don't know why I would not expect it, because in every industry there was a percentage of people that didn't feel the government policies were appropriate, and we had the same in our building, and that's legitimate, but I didn't expect to see it, and so we had to manage that too. And you know, a lot of the early experiences, we could look to any industry and say, what are you doing about this? And that was one of the experiences. Like, everybody had that challenge to have staff that went different directions around the government policies. So, but you know, it made it one extra layer of challenges when we had to send people out to do work that was potentially dangerous just because of the presence of the COVID-19 in the community.
How did you make space for your staff who didn't necessarily agree with vaccines or masks or anything else?
Well, we did, I think what most people did, we gave them alternatives when we could. So, you know, you're going to do this, and if you don't do this, then here's the alternative options for you. It wasn't, you know, you have to leave. I mean, at some point, I think when we didn't know much about it, I think that was where we were at. Like a lot of, like we saw in the medical community, there's a deadline, you have your vaccination or you leave, you have whatever. And, you know, we never got to that point. Luckily, we were able to give people options and to keep them all on staff and show them they're respected regardless of, you know, their beliefs in the issue, and to give them valuable work to do and to, you know, not to single them out or to, we did our best, I think, anyway, not to point to them in the organization and say they're different from what you believe or whatever. And I think that's paid off, because those staff members all work well together again, like I'm sure they do in every industry. That this is a memory of something, and it's okay to have disagreements about things.
Fentanyl and opioids.
Yeah, well, we had you know, at the beginning of my term, crystal meth was the threat for our community. And there was limited fentanyl here, but it was present in the province. So in Regina, people were dying from overdoses, and what we were seeing in Saskatoon was psychosis from meth. And so we were working on we did our best to try and encourage the development of a provincial drug strategy, and we actually, through some help from Johnson Shoyama, got the province interested in and got one developed. And it was hard because we were looking at Regina, which is where a lot of the committee members were from, and their experience was fentanyl. Our experience was crystal meth, and we needed to develop some kind of strategy that dealt with both. But very quickly, we started to see more and more and more fentanyl in our community too, and so now we have a lot of the same challenges, and it takes a toll, obviously, on the people who are addicted in the community. It's so much more dangerous now with fentanyl present, but it's on our staff as well. We have officers now that are going to overdose deaths far more regularly than anybody should have to experience that kind of a traumatic call. We have officers that are that are supplying naloxone to people who are overdosing many times, and that's again not a traditional police role.
No, that's
it's
what
not
I was,
something we train for, and it impacts you emotionally. You know, you're not a medical professional who shows up to help. You're a police officer who shows up for the potential of a crime or violence, and then now you're thrust into a different role, and you have to be around the families and the grieving and all of that stuff. So it's hard for our staff, and so we've had to address that through increasing and strengthening our mental health strategy to make sure that there are resources available, because I don't need to say it, but an officer can't do a good job in the community if he needs to get healthy himself. So we need to make sure that they're fit and healthy physically and emotionally before we send them out and to do some of this really heavy work.
It's a different sort of trauma.
Yes.
It's not a car accident. It's not a murder.
Yeah.
It's not a robbery that's gone sideways.
Right.
This is a call to a suburban home that could be anything.
Yes. And I think we've at least learned and matured enough in our understanding of it to understand that people who are overdosing are people who have a health issue. And if you think of them as criminals or whatever, perhaps that's easier for a police officer to see their role there. But when we've learned, I think, to understand that they have health issues, and so you don't see the policing role, and yet you're thrust into helping with that and addressing that. And we've developed strong partnerships, I think, as a result too. I know that part of our provincial strategy was around overdose outreach teams, and so the fire here and some caseworkers or social workers are going out and working with folks and trying to address that, and we're part of the data connections there and stuff. So that's helped strengthen, I think, our partnerships with both health and with Saskatoon Fire. So some good things have come out of that research and that policy development.
So Allison had supplied me some stats a week or so ago when I had asked about the SPS budget. And when I did my calculations, it came out as over the past 5 years, the police budget has gone up by about 4.5% a year, sort of like a high 3 to a low 5.
Right.
So that's what it averages out as. As somebody on the way out now,
Yeah.
Who's seen this from the inside, can you envision a scenario where city police are not going to council on any given year and asking for more money?
I think, to be honest, I think that in a growing city, so if we had a static population, you might be able to find some efficiency measures to keep your budget low. But the city is growing, and so it makes sense then, if you're going to maintain the same level of service, that you would have to grow with the population at least. And if you don't do that, and there's been many years when that didn't happen. So prior to my arrival, there was 3 years where we had either one or no police officers added to the authorized strength in the face of a growing city. And so what that does is dilute your ability to respond to some of the pressures that we're seeing. So I think that we watch the budget, and we want to make sure that we're not spending more than I think can be justified through growth and through inflation. We know that we continue to spend between 20 and 22% of the city's expenditure budget that comes to police. So it's not out of control. It's not different than it is, a few years ago. It's been sort of consistent. And it also, I think, is appropriate when we compare ourselves to our peers. What are you spending as a percentage of your city's budget? So we have ways of making sure we're not out of line as far as, our comparators and that kind of stuff. But I think if you want, it's a supply and demand relationship, as there are more social issues that create an unsafe environment. There's going to have to be more response, and if that response is policing, then it's going to cost money. What we try to do is to make it cost the least amount of money by developing partnerships, which by finding alternate police responses, like our AROs, our officers who are not fully trained and don't have a firearm, but they're in the community. So we're being as creative as we can. And it has the added benefit that it's actually more effective, than just traditional policing models.
So to sort of wrap that up, it's going to continue to cost money.
Yes.
More money every year.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not surprised, but
Yeah,
it's
no.
interesting to hear you say it.
Yeah, I think if we don't grow as a population, then at least there's inflationary costs that are going to impact police budgets. But certainly in a city like ours, we grow by the population of Humboldt every year. So that takes resources and it takes infrastructure. Policing is one of those levels of infrastructure, and it should be expected as we grow that there's going to be those needs.
So you're on your way out. This will be probably the last time we talk, unless I catch you coming out of court.
Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity to tell people in Saskatoon perhaps something about policing that you've either been unable to say because of your position. There's sensitivities around it.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what do people in Saskatoon not understand about policing that they need to understand?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in a lot of trouble. So I won't say everything that's on my mind.
Oh, no, please do.
What I do know about policing after 36 years is that the people who are doing this job are heroes. They're absolutely incredible, and they do it for the right reasons. We have, our staff are educated. Like all of our young officers come in with post-secondary education. They come in with a desire to help the community. And sometimes we're cast in a dark light by events that happen somewhere, maybe somewhere else in the world. But these are your neighbors, your hockey coaches, your friends. Their kids go to school with your kids, and yet every day, for some reason, and I'm glad they do it, they put a uniform on and they go out and risk their own personal safety. They spend time away from their own families to make sure folks are safe. And I have been amazed to watch the people that work here do that work, and amazed at the depths of their compassion and how they treat each other. It's just incredible.
Do you think this is something the public doesn't understand?
Well, I see criticisms. I see criticisms of policing, and sometimes I believe they stereotype police like lots of other things get stereotyped, and I can tell you the stereotype is wrong. We have 1 in 4 of our frontline officers are female. We got this incredibly diverse police service. They're respectful of each other. They're just good people, and that's been really pleasant to watch. And one thing that has been surprising, and I think most people wouldn't expect, is the complex needs folks that we deal with every day. You would expect people to think that officers are frustrated with them and that we're angry about having to deal with them over and over. And what I've found is that our officers are compassionate and care about those individuals. They bring their own clothing in to leave them in detention so people don't get sent out in the cold without a jacket or socks or shoes, or those sorts of things happen here. And I don't know that everybody sees that the way I do. So I'm just proud of it, and I wish everybody felt the same way about the officers as I do.
Be nice.
And be nice.
It's better to be nice.
That's
it's mean
right.
enough out there.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, Dan.